It's a great pleasure to be part of this magnificent event where we celebrate the life, the accomplishments, and the many more accomplishments that President Perez will have for the sake of his country and for the sake of humanity at large. Well, the title of this panel is whether there is hope for a better green future. And if I were to look at that question in light of what the international community has done to address one of the most challenging problems of our generation and of future generations, meaning climate change, unfortunately, I would have to be really pessimistic. In 1992, the international community got together in Rio. Then we went to Kyoto, and we have seen a number of initiatives, of international meetings, of commitments. But if the scientists are right, all of that in no way adds up to change the present and very dangerous trend in which we are. And I think it is true. We have to be optimistic, but we also have to be responsible, and we have to be realistic, and we have to be critical of the big failure that as an international community we have had in addressing seriously this very serious problem. Unfortunately, there is not yet a very clear path to find that solution. It is truly sad, I will say very dramatic, that in the last COP meeting last December in Doha, Qatar, the agreement was again to agree that in a few years we will have an agreement to solve the problem. And this is, yes, you laugh, but I think it's very sad, because this is a very serious problem. Not only because it's happening, despite what the naysayers say. You see, they prefer to ignore science. They prefer to ignore what many scientists all over the world are telling us, that with the business as usual, by the end of this century, maybe the Earth will be, is likely to be between 3 and 5 degrees warmer, and that will have disastrous consequences in natural and human environments with very serious economic consequences. And the question is, why are we failing to solve this problem? Well, we are failing because it's very complex. This is a unique problem, because as it was stressed by Prince Albert, this is a problem that has no borders. It's a global problem. And every time you deal with a global problem, you have to deal with issues like sovereignty, you have to deal with issues of national pride, you have to deal with issues of free riding, and actually in this case it's even more complex than that, because we have to solve a problem that will affect future generations, that actually we know that even in the business as usual scenario, those generations will be richer than ours. And we are being asked to make a sacrifice today for the sake of the future. And that has some complexity by itself. And that means essentially that if we want to address this problem, we need collective action. We need to organize ourselves to provide what is called a global public good. And so far, we haven't been able to do that. And one of the reasons is that we took a path that perhaps was wrong, which was the Kyoto Protocol. At Kyoto, we decided, and I am afraid that, not afraid, I'm proud on one hand, and then on the other recognize in retrospect that perhaps we were wrong, that the way to go was to agree that we wanted to limit warming to certain degrees, and therefore we needed a global cap in emissions, and then we asked a group of countries to negotiate allocations of those emission caps, and then to let the rest of the countries to do as they wish. Well, for a long time, people like myself, we have said, well, you know, this is a zero-sum game, which may have a mathematical solution, the famous Nash equilibrium, but this approach has no geopolitical solution. As long as we have an approach by which countries are left in a situation in which your allowance of emissions is against my allowance of emissions, you have a problem that is politically impossible to solve. And that is why we have got to the point where we are. If we really want an international system that addresses the problem, and we have now committed to do it by 2015, we need to change substantially the approach we have followed. And what we economists say, and when I say we economists say, because there are economists from the left, and you mentioned one, Joe Stiglitz, and also most conservative economists, says from the right or conservative. And all of us agree that perhaps, you know, Leonardo, as one of my mentors frequently remembers, Leonardo said, you know, the highest simplicity is the highest form of sophistication. What we need to have is countries to commit to accept to price carbon, that every time that we emit carbon, we make in a very transparent way that people have to pay for that emission. So we have to agree on an internationally harmonized price of carbon. Because if we focus the international negotiation without implying, by the way, a mechanism of income transfers, because that has been a big problem too, you know, tell rich countries, limit your emissions, but on the other hand, you have to pay to poorer countries for not making emissions, I am afraid that that is politically impossible. I'm not against making transfer of income to poor countries so that they can not only mitigate, but also adapt to climate change. But we need not to try to kill two birds with one stone. We need the stone to do climate mitigation, and that has to be a price of carbon. But of course, we need to help also poor countries to do their own mitigation and to do their adaptation, but we have to treat that problem separately. So my submission today, Madam Chair, is not that I am pessimistic. You know, I want to be an optimistic, but I also want to be very frank and very realistic. And my submission is that if we continue along the path that we took wrongly in the 1990s, and that we have continued to insist on that, we will fail again. And that is why me, as many others, have decided to be very outspoken about this and to say we are wrong, we are not going to get it the way we are pursuing it. We should try to negotiate an international regime focused on harmonized carbon pricing. Thank you very much.